Well, guys, let's get going. I'm sure some people, there'll be some people that are popping in, and Mr. Bocook, the kids have kind of, I mean, as I'm sure the kids have kind of moved on and like, okay, well, now I have a summer, so now I'm going to take advantage of it, and I'm going to work. I'm going to take summer classes. There's a lot of things they're doing. So I'm sure I've gotten a lot of messages saying, hey, I'm going to get in there, pop in a little bit later. I get off work at 7 or whatever, but so we'll have kids pop in. But hey, guys, it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Jay Bocook. Obviously, we're going to want him to kind of talk about his drum corps career and where he came from and all of the cool stories and all that. So I'll let him do all of it. But I do want to say that I grew up probably a lot like you guys, where I knew the name on the music that I was playing when I was in high school, or it's like, well, composed by Jay Bocook. The correct me if the Aztec Fire, I believe, was something that we all played a long time ago. So of course I knew the name because I would see it a lot of times, but I got the honor of working with Mr. Bocook in the 1998 Cadets is when I finally met him and was able to work with him and work with his arrangements, and it was such a treat to do that. So that's where I introduced him, and Jay writes for Avon. He has since 2000, early 2000s, 2001. So it's been awesome working with all of his arrangements and his music and all that. I will say that I want to tell a quick story because it's a funny story. But before I do that, I just wanted to tell you that, for me personally, Jay is on my Mount Rushmore of favorite arrangers and their activity. There's no doubt about that. He's on my Mount Rushmore. He's one of my favorites and love everything that he's done, and huge fan of Jay. So this is a real treat. My story, and I know Jay will remember this. This was in 1999. The Cadets did the show The Big Apple, and the music was taken from Johann de Meij's Big Apple piece. And I believe it was finals week. Jay, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was finals week when Johann de Meij showed up at our rehearsal. And I remember breakfast, Jay being he was concerned about it. He couldn't stop walking around, kind of nervous about, because if you don't, I mean, I don't know him very well, and I'm sure Jay knows him. But he is someone that is very protective of his music. Probably took a little bit to actually get permission to arrange his music. I'm sure Jay could probably comment on that. But I remember being a little concerned because I know there are parts of that show that Jay composed. There was a jazz section that it was really not a part of the Big Apple. It's not a part of that at all. And Jay just did it. Jay does his thing, and it's awesome, and it's drum corps awesomeness. But I remember watching Johann de Meij walk around and Jay kind of being nervous about that day. So I will never forget that one. But it was cool to meet Johann de Meij. It was great. But anyway, great story. I'm sure Jay remembers that. He might be able to tell us a little bit more details about that one. But pretty funny story. Anyway, without further ado, I'll let him start talking. But ladies and gentlemen, one of my favorites, Jay Bocook.
Thanks, Matt, and Michael and Ben and Crown. This is awesome. Matt, this idea is awesome, to come in, and even though I write for a different team, it's just so cool to be here. I have a long history with Crown. I started consulting with Crown in 1993 after they won the Division II championship and decided to move into Division I. They hired me to be a consultant, and I was for several years, and actually wrote for the drum corps for a few years in the late 90s. Not with the talent you guys are now. Matt and Michael and team came in there and turned this into this brass machine that's just unbelievably fantastic and cool. And I'm just glad to have been a part of it. I've been a friend with all these guys for a long, long time. Michael was my predecessor at Cadets. And, through our work with Ben and when I left Cadets in the early 2000s for a couple of years, I went to work for Blast, which these guys all have a thing with that too. So, I mean, we're all kind of intertwined here. We've been great friends for a long, long time. Great competitors, but even better friends. And it's just really cool that you asked me to be a part of this. I just think this is fantastic. Every drum corps right now is trying to find out how to deal with this. And this is one of the better ways I can think of. Let's just talk about the great times we've had and what it's meant to us and how important it is in our lives. And I think that's just awesome. And yes, Matt, I do remember that story. I was nervous because by the last week of the year, a lot of that was not his.
Right.
I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, come on in the circle. Come on. I'm like, oh, no. And he'd look at me and go, what is that? And I say, well, the visual people. It's the visual people. They made me change this thing. It wasn't my idea. I wrote exactly what you wrote, and they said we were over here and it can't work. So, and then we do something else. It was a completely not his thing too. And well, what is that? I'm like, don't we have somewhere to go? Let's. I was very nervous that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
He dealt with it very professionally, though. He was cool about it, and I think he knew that we had to do what we had to do in drum corps, and especially that show. I mean, what was the opener ended up being the closer in that show. I mean, that's how crazy that whole thing was. So, yeah, it's always intimidating because, I compose as well, and no composer likes to hear, well, we've kind of tried to upgrade or improve. And you're like, what do you mean improve? It's like, it's just not the right thing to say. But that's what we have to do. In drum corps, we have certain needs that have to happen. You guys all know this, and what you start with is not always exactly what you end up with, but it goes through a metamorphosis that has to happen for all the reasons that it has to be excellent. And I've just been glad to be a part of it for quite a while. I will tell you guys a good story about how I got started in this activity. I grew up in Florida, and there weren't any drum corps there when I grew up. And actually, my high school band started Suncoast Sound, if you've ever heard the name of that. That started out as my high school band. Basically, the whole band became the drum corps. They had a twirler and everything in the first year. But because there was no drum corps, I couldn't march anywhere. Plus, I was a saxophonist. I learned to play percussion, thinking that maybe I could do that in some drum corps, but time went and I couldn't. So I ended up in the band business. Excuse me. Got tickled. Writing for bands for several years. And worked with a lot of the staff members at different drum corps. And finally in the 80s, sorry, Matt, take this over. I
don't know what to say. Finally in the 80s, he started writing. Michael, do you remember he wrote for, I know he writes for Hal Leonard right now, but Jensen?
Yep, Jensen Publications.
Yeah.
I was like you, Matt. I mean, I was in high school going, Jay Bocook, everything said Jay Bocook on it.
Yeah.
He was one of those guys.
Marching band files, concert band files.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you aspiring band directors. Bocook's got a few. I think he might. I might have to double check. He's sitting down right now, but I think there was a band that commissioned a work for him that performed in the Midwest too. He might get into that. So, you all right, Jay?
I think so. Funny tickle in my throat.
Yeah.
I've had a head cold for a couple of weeks. Like one ear is all stopped up,
Yeah.
which is not good for an arranger. But yeah, finally in the 80s, I had a good friend, Freddie Martin. You probably know the name. We were competing high school band directors when I first came out. And we knew each other's work. He knew I was an arranger. And he was the director of Spirit of Atlanta at that time. And he called me in like April and said, look, my arranger's having writer's block. Can you help finish the show for us? And I said, well, sure, I can help out. How much is left? He goes, only the last 11 and a half minutes. That's a true story. The guy wrote the first 30 seconds and shut down. So I had to write the whole show in April and May. And so I wrote there a couple years, and then Michael replaced me at Spirit, got him back in finals, which was awesome. And I decided to, that was fine. I'd had my drum corps experience. And then when Michael left the cadets in 93, George Hopkins had heard we'd worked together several clinics. We'd judged together several times. He'd talked to Greg Bim and a couple other people at Marian Catholic and said, you ought to look at me. So he called me and said, would you consider coming up here? I said, well, the cadets were my idols at the time. I mean, all through that 80s run, everything they did was like, I'm all about that for sure. So I said, yeah. And so that's how that all started. Very interesting. We got through a lot of stuff in the 90s and different changes. Matt and your team came and started in 97, but officially in 98, everybody came in and stayed there a couple years. And then you guys moved on and did your thing. And now Crown is where it is. So that's kind of how my career has lasted. I've just been fortunate to be able to have a job in the business, for the last, 25, 26 years in writing and still being able to write for bands. Like I said, I was much more established writing for bands before I ever do. This is a great story too. In 93, my first year with the cadets, it's spring training. The whole tuba section came into my room. We were staying at some college near Allentown or whatever. And they said, we just want to know, you're a band guy. Do you really know what you're doing writing for bugles?
No.
Yeah, the whole tuba section came in. Do you know what you're doing? I said, I don't know. I think we're going to be okay. So, I think that's funny. I was told before I ever went to a camp that we had all 3 valve bugles. That's what I was told by everybody. So I wrote thinking there were all 3 valve bugles. And as Michael probably will tell you, the first and second baritones refused to change for a long time with that drum. They stayed on the 2 valve bugles. Euphoniums would play 3 valves, but not the first and second baritones. They were still playing those chrome instruments when I got there.
Yep.
And I wrote a passage. The first passage of the show had a 3rd valve in it. So, of course, they questioned it, like, this guy didn't know what he's doing. I said, well, nobody told me you had 2 valve instruments.
Mm-hmm.
I'd written for that before, it's not a problem. So, just the funny little stuff you run into.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my story.
And so you were with the cadets for 93 through when?
Well, 93 through 2001. Then I took 2 years off because it was just getting too much.
Right.
Michael can tell you about that. And that's when I went to work for Blast, those 2 years.
Yeah.
And then in 2004, they asked me to come back, and I said, okay, I can, but I can't do it like before. I can't do a lot of tour, because most of my living I make in the summer writing for bands.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do the tour. I couldn't do every day like I was doing for a long, long time. So if we can do this, hotels when I get to a place, rental cars, not, da-da-da-da. I said, I can come back if we can do that. So I came back in 2004 and stayed through 16 was my last year. Had enough again. And at the same time I was writing for the Blue Knights starting in 2011, I think. I was doing both corps for that time. And the Blue Knights were getting better. And, things were happening. So I left after the cadets after 2016 and just was writing for Blue Knights until this year. And then that kind of design team kind of blew up at the same time the cadets design team blew up, and they asked me if I'd come back, and I said, yeah. So
I have to thank Jay for me being at Carolina Crown, because when he left and he was done in 2001, in 2002, George called me and asked me if I wanted to come back and write for the drum corps.
I tried to talk you into it.
I called Jay because, and I've told other young writers about this, but it's like when somebody calls me to take a gig, the first thing I want to know is, did the person choose to leave on their own, or did something, not above board happen that they got chased out? Because if that's the case, I don't want to be known as the guy who took the job that Jay was chased out from. So I called Jay and I wanted to know what the deal was. And after like 2 hours of talking, I hung up the phone and I was like, he reminded me of every reason why I'm not at the Cadets right now. So I called George and I was like, it's somebody else's turn. I had a good time there, but it's somebody else's turn to do what they do. And then the next year, Jim called and had me interested in Crown. So I got to thank you for that, because if I would have took that gig, I probably would not be a Crown right now. I probably would be doing nothing right now, actually.
Small world and very intertwined. How all these pieces. Well, like I said, when I left, that's when I left after 2001. And if I hadn't have done that, I would have probably never hooked up with the Blast connection, which has been a huge part of my life since that time.
Yeah.
And I've written for them for on and off for all these years since. I mean, and had great trips to Japan and fantastic performers and just experiences I wouldn't have had without that opportunity. So it is just interesting how it all comes in, how it all plays together.
And then I'm not sure if everybody knows, but the latest Blast thing, the whole Disney, you wrote all that.
I didn't do the whole show. I did the whole second act. But the first act, there's Frank Sullivan's got a chart, Jim Prime's got a chart in it. I mean, I think they're, Rhapsody in Blue, I think he did that for Brass Theater a long time ago, maybe. But
yeah,
there are a couple other people in there. Vince Oliver's involved.
Right. That's right.
But that last show was fantastic. Disney music with a Blast interpretation. Man, I wish we could bring it over here.
Yeah,
I think the copyright thing is an issue here. It's a lot easier in Europe and Japan to deal with Disney than it is in this country. So we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, I remember when we went to your house a couple years ago. I'm not sure if the kids know, but Jay lives very close to Gardner-Webb. I mean, it's hour, I don't know.
Maybe an hour. Maybe.
An hour or so. So there was a night off, and all of a sudden we went to the Brass staff went to Jay's house, and we grilled out hamburgers and stuff. And Jay was working on some things, so we went up to his office where he's at right now and played us some stuff. It was awesome. It was very cool.
Well, Donnie's involved, of course, and a lot of people that are all the way back from Star through Cadets and to Crown. It's all those people are interconnected, and it's just it's a lot of fun to see those performers, because they're all like masters. They all got masters, but they're 30 years old or 32. They don't quite want to settle down and just be a middle school band director. They still want to try to perform. So they're just terrific performers, and just great people. And it's just really a lot of fun to write for that kind of ensemble. Where every part is a solo part. The fifth trumpet part is as good as the first trumpet part, player. Yeah. It's just really thrilling to write for that kind of ensemble.
Well, yeah, you've had some good ensembles to work with the Cadets. That 98 book is pretty fun. I know the kids, and I want to invite the kids. If you guys have any questions or so, let me know on the chat, and then we'll get you to talk to Jay. But one of the questions that they like asking is, of all the shows that you've written, what are some of your favorites? And it doesn't have to be a show. It could be like, man, that one part, I loved how that turned out. Could be anything.
You could ask the same thing to Michael. That's hard. That's hard to decide, because each one of these shows you do is in your heart, certainly that year. It's the most important thing you've done, because it's the last one you've just finished. And then when you try to reflect back, it's difficult. There are some great times. And I remember one that involves you, and it was 98. That was the Stonehenge year. And you were teching the mellophones. And my wife was marching. She was the horn sergeant that year. And there was this one part in part 3 that's the most sinister thing I've ever seen in my life. And I just wrote what he wrote. What the composer wrote. I didn't touch it. It was just exactly what he wrote. And we are somewhere, and you call me, it's Jay.
Yeah.
how's this go? I mean, and we both sat there looking at it going, well, I think it's like, I mean, it's just sinister.
Yeah.
You know, here we were we ended up, I think we won that year, but like we're like in June and we can't figure out how the party even goes. The kids are like, don't worry, we got it. You know,
actually, two things about that. Number one, I'm not sure if a lot of kids know, probably not, but that was not what the show was going to be at the beginning of the year. In fact, it was a Russian show, which I believe you may have written almost the whole thing. I know we had Festive Overture.
Yeah.
We may have had a couple other parts, but I remember Festive Overture.
The only thing I remember was Festive Overture, and that's what we did. You know, the big first camp for everybody is December, right? So we do the big camp. We learn Festive Overture. We have this whole new brass staff. We have this whole new approach we're taking. We're off and running. And then I go to Midwest, and a band director friend of mine from Denver says, Jay, do you know this piece, this brass band piece called Stonehenge? You should play this piece. So I got the score and listened to it and said, oh my God, we got to do this, you know, because that's all we didn't have much else to the Russian show yet. We just had Festive Overture. So right then we changed. And so we didn't see any of that stuff until January, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, that mellophone lick you were talking about. And you know, the funny thing is I don't remember working on that. We worked on other stuff. The kids they could play that mellophone lick. I'll give everybody the recording and where that is.
That was an unbelievable mellophone section.
It was good. Yeah. A lot of kids.
It had all those brass theater kids that had come over.
Yeah.
They were just fantastic. And the soloists in that brass section were unbelievably good.
Derek Gibson was one of those. He's the brass caption for the Bluecoats. Yeah. I told this story to him the other day where Derek Gibson was funny because he would get these sun blisters on his lips like the whole year. You just look at his lips, it's like, holy smokes. And he was a soloist. He was one of our solo. And dude would never miss. Maybe in rehearsal he would, but at a show, he would never miss, even though it blisters all over his face. Like, I don't know how you're doing it.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, that was a great year. It was a great. I really enjoyed all you guys coming over. That new team. You had were kind of on fire and very inspired for the brass section to do. And Michael could talk about this in the '80s and the early '90s. Even though the core was fantastic, but the big innovation stuff was really coming from what the visual people were doing. Yeah. And I fought that my first few years there. It's like, no, the visuals, this is what's going to be. So you're going to have to fix your stuff so it fits the visual. And it was nice to see your team come in there and go, no, we're going to get this brass thing established the way it needs to be, you know? And so that was reassuring.
Yeah.
I don't know, Michael, did you feel that any in your time there? I did.
Yeah, it was, you know, I was young when I started, and I had George Zingali who was pulling, you this way because he wanted to be things done this a certain way. And then you had, Tom and the drum guys, and they wanted you to do it this certain way. And then there was George who wanted you to do it this certain way. But it was all, what Zingali and Sylvester did back then was just so different that you were just writing to make it work. But I will say, though, that George Zingali was so passionate about music that it was important to him to get that right. Like with Jeremiah, I learned how to write better with him because you had to think ahead. If I do this here, I can't do that here because he's going to have to move people to get there. Like he taught me how to think that way. But man, he was on fire about making the music sound like the music was supposed to sound.
Yeah. It's just been a beautiful journey for all of us to go through, and that we've remained good friends and close friends all through time and consult with each other. Michael and I have shared scores together when we're working on different projects. It's been a great situation, and I love the fact that Crown is in my home state, and that I was part of it early when it was still trying to make a name for itself, and and it's always been a very special place for me. I had the chance to even be the keynote speaker at the opening administrative session, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And when this organization was emerging like it is to where it is, and it was just a fantastic time to be a part of all that.
Yeah. I've been very lucky to know Jay too. I mean, Jay, like, this is going to sound weird, but Jay's a real writer to me. You know, he composes, he publishes, he has such a wealth of work and a depth of work that, you know, for me to be able to converse with him and learn from him and do things, know him as a friend, it's special to me. Like those are really special relationships to me.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. And even that first year where you left cadets and I took over, we met in the summer and had great conversations, and you helped the horn line get better. I remember in the ballad you said, "Are you ever going to play anything other than fortissimo?" And 2 days later, we had all kinds of shapes in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite some of the kids for some questions. And Jay, what I like doing is like I want the kid to ask the question. I don't want you to hear from me. So you know, I want and what we do is and Donovan will go first here. But if anybody else wants a question, just put it up in the chat thing, and we'll get things going. But and your questions could spark some stories. So please don't be afraid to do that. But anyway, they talk. I want them to introduce themselves, tell them where you're from and what school they go to and all that. So Donovan, go ahead, unmute.
Hey, Jay. My name is Donovan Gargilla.
Hey, Donovan.
I march Crown, obviously, and I go to Westchester University for music education. I was wondering, the Blue Knights 2015 show, that's one of my favorite arranged shows. Just wondering your inspiration of putting the Beatles in that kind of context with performance, and just how that trombone solo came in the ballad. I love that solo.
It's interesting. Design teams, we're all trying to do the same thing, but the chemistry of design teams is completely different from drum corps to drum corps. And that Blue Knights crew the design team was really paced by the drum guys, and they were, you know, they were thinking color guard stuff. I mean, that's kind of unusual for drum teams to be thinking about all the props and color guard stuff. But that was the idea. And I had just come from, I love the Beatles' Love in Las Vegas. I've seen it like 7 times. And we really just I really wanted to do a Beatles show. And we couldn't go that far. Now we've since found out you certainly can go that far. But I wanted to do a whole Beatles show that year, but all we could get away with was that opening thing. And we were using the lyrics and how they would come back and forth throughout the show and all that kind of stuff and make that work. And, you know, we tried to do a thing where we opened the show with no trumpets. Everybody was either playing mellophone or baritone. And that was cool. That was a cool experiment to do. It took a while for that to sound like it needed to. And the trombone thing, there was really no inspiration. It's just like, it needs to be a trombone solo. Nothing else will really work there, you know, and we found a player and tried to make that work. That was a really good, I love designing shows with that team of the Blue Knights from, let's say, 2014 through last year. It's a very different kind of vibe. And I you know, you guys all know the drum corps. It really was kind of a special niche of the way that drum corps went about doing things, and it was there was a real great patience and excellence to being patient with, you know, drum corps usually just in your face all the time, and they did it a different way, and I really appreciated that. And it was fun to not think of writing quite the same way. Like, this is what a drum corps would do here. Well, let's not do that this time. Let's try this. And that's kind of refreshing sometimes. So that's kind of how that worked.
Thank you. One of my favorite shows.
Say hi to Andy for me.
Awesome. Yes, I'm unmuted. Sammer's next.
Hi. I'm going to be honest. I kind of forgot what my question was, but I'll just introduce myself. My name is Sammer. I go to North Carolina State University.
Oh, my dad went to school there.
Awesome. I study biological sciences there. I'm also pursuing a trombone minor, trombone performance minor there. I'm trying to find a good way to word this. The Stonehenge show, you mentioned how you used a brass band piece. For those of you that don't know, I'm a huge brass band nerd. I love that. I love that music. So I'm just curious, because I understand, at least from a compositional standpoint, those tend to be a little more frantic and much more difficult to, I guess, add to the field than other pieces are. So I'm just wondering, how you implement those effectively with, only, 4 main instrument sections versus a brass band, which is a little more diverse.
Yeah. Well, it's a great point. I became a brass band fan when I was in high school, and that's a long time ago, because our first trumpet player was actually a cornetist in the Salvation Army. And that's where brass bands all came out of, is the Salvation Army bands, because that's the music they have. They don't use pianos or organs or choirs. They use the brass instruments. It grew into the competitive brass band thing. And even when I was in high school, I was following the competitive British brass, or not just British, but European brass band thing. So I've loved it, and got to see the New Zealand brass band in person. They came to the United States a couple of times, and they were enhanced. They were bigger than the 27 people that they are now, but it was unbelievable. It changed my world to see this, the intensity and power. And I went to the brass band championships in Kirkrade, Holland, 1 year out of high school, and got to see the finals. And it was like, oh my God, how do these people do this? These people are freaks, And over in the US, we were doing the same thing, but it was basketball, not brass bands. All the textile mills would hire basketball players and say they worked there. They didn't really work there. They were there to play basketball and had these huge championships. Well, over there, it's the same thing. The textile mills hire people because they're brass players, and they have this thing. Now, these pieces, and I'm sure you guys talk about this, but these are test pieces. So they have to go through so many styles. They have to be impossible to play because they have to have these pieces. So it is a challenge. Well, first of all, just reading the scores is a challenge, because hardly any instrument is like we see it. All trombones and treble clef. The only instrument in bass clef is a bass trombone. And what is going on with this? There's 17 cornet parts. It's crazy. But it's still about what you hear. I tell it to my students who study with me. It's, when you look at a score of music, having the full score is great, but everything looks the same on a full score. But to your ear, it's not all the same. What does your ear hear? And that's what's the most important part of trying to make sure that's what gets in your version of it. What the second Ripieno cornet's doing might look the same as ever, but you might not notice it when you actually listen to it. So it is a challenge, but no more than a full orchestra. Just because of the range extensions you have in a full orchestra with trying to deal with what we do. But you're right. It's that simple. We have 4 voices, and that makes it that difficult, because that's all you got. Now, with the advent of the soundscape, we have some added advantage now in the front ensemble miking can, let us produce some stuff that we couldn't do when I first started in this business. But it's still a unique challenge. And that is a great, brass band music is a great place to find stuff, just because of the fireworks that are inherent in the competitive brass band pieces. I find it funny that a lot of times the slow movements sound like bad Hollywood. When you get this piece that sounds like the greatest thing you ever heard, and then you get to the slow movement, it sounds like a B-movie love theme. It's like, the Hollywood wannabes, I guess, but it is interesting. And I'm good friends with a lot of those writers. I'm not putting them down, and have been for quite a while. But good question.
Thank you, Jay.
Yep.
Jay, have you ever been to the World Championships over there?
I have.
Oh, man. Michael and I have been talking about doing. It's like it's on our bucket list. It's like just going over there and.
I went in 1974.
Holy smokes!
In Kerkrade, Holland, and I stood backstage for the final three groups, and I thought the place was going to blow up. It was so loud. I mean, and I was behind them. There's just the energy that 27 people can play with it. I'll tell you, the trombone players in those bands are not afraid to let you have it. I mean, just let you have it. You know, and they say, well, they're all playing conical instruments. Well, I don't care. It's loud.
Yeah.
And under control.
Yeah. Sound great.
They talked about all, you know, the Salvationists, how they tie a cornet, string on the roof and play without any pressure. And, you know,
yeah,
it's incredible. The whole system is incredible.
1974. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Joseph, you're up.
Hey, Jay. My name's Joseph. I hope it's not too windy. I'm currently biking home from work. I'm from Canada. I go to the University of Calgary. Got a bit of a history with the Calgary Stampede Showband. It is really cool to hear about all the Kerkrade stuff. I actually went there for the World Music Contest in 2017. So that's really cool to hear about. My question is if you had one ultimate piece of advice for a new composer, so an up-and-coming composer.
I'm guessing it would be, what would it be?
Yeah.
You were good up until the last line. Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm going to say two things. I think you have to trust your instincts. Number one, I think a lot of people don't have the confidence to do that. You have to trust your instincts. And the other thing that I tell my students, it's not how you write, it's what you write. No, there's too many students think there's some magic scoring trick. If you just do this and this, then it all works out right. It really is not about that. It's about not how you write, it's about what you write. It's the notes that are the most important thing. To me, and maybe I'm old school in this, it's not the story, it's not the poem, it's not the emotional image that you have in mind when you're writing, it's the notes. What are you actually writing? And if you trust your instinct, I think you'll be in good shape. I'll add one more third thing. Really learn your craft. You can't shortchange it. Now that we have software like we do, everybody's got a computer. It's easy to get MuseScore. It's free or whatever. Even if you have Finale or Sibelius, all of a sudden you think you're an arranger. It's not that easy. Michael will tell you that. Matt will tell you that. There's a lot of years of developing a craft, of making a tool belt of vocabulary, so you're prepared when you're asked to move into this style or this style or this style. It really is a craft that you need to spend a lot of time with and really listen and remember what you hear, because that's what arrangers do and composers do. They hear something and go, okay, I got that. I know what that is. And it doesn't leave their head. So that's my advice. Hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
And yeah, I was there for the World Championship as well. And my high school band won the band division in 1974. I was the assistant director, but it was cool.
Awesome.
There was a band competing in that on a track on bicycles.
The bicycle band. We saw the bicycle band when we went there as well. They were really cool.
They've been around a long time then. That's what I remember from Kerkrade was the bicycle band. Like, how are they doing this?
That's great. If anybody else has a question, let me know. Jay, I'll go with one. You've been able to meet, through your career, many different composers and writers and famous people. Who was somebody that you met that it's like I met this person, I met this composer, and it was awesome because I was able to spend some time with this person, and it was great to get advice from them. It could be drum corps or not drum corps.
This one's easy. It was John Williams. And I've had several occasions to be around him and with him and work with him. And I realized when we were preparing, he did a concert that he conducted with the Marine Band, the President's Own, in 2003. He actually did two of them, but the first one was in 2003. And he needed people to do these transcriptions of his works. Now, a lot of arrangers have been arranging his work, but not for the Marine Band. So myself and Paul Lavender and John Moss were contacted through my publishing company to do these transcriptions. And I got to do a handful of them, and each of us got to do a handful of them. But when I was in, and the concerts were in the summer, and they were in the Kennedy Center, and we were there for a week previously for rehearsals. And when I was there, and they rehearsed in, John Philip Sousa Hall, and I'm sitting there with these tables set up in front of the band like sight reading judges, with all these scores laid out, and all the transcribers are sitting there, and John Williams is conducting, and they're doing Star Wars, and I'm like, what has just happened? What is this? How is this possible? I'm 5 feet away from John Williams conducting Star Wars, and I'm looking at the score like, it was an incredible experience. And it led to several, and it's all just, it wasn't because I was any better or anything else. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And it was one of the most terrifying and exciting experiences. First of all, I just told you the exciting part. The terrifying part was thinking, is he going to turn around and go, which one of you did this one? Or what were you thinking there? But none of that happened. He was very gracious. If he didn't like something, he certainly didn't tell us. All he would say was, it sounds familiar, but I can't tell where it's coming from because of the way the instruments are set up. He didn't know where to, usually in the orchestra, he knows right where to turn the cue, but he wasn't sure. But I got to work with him on 2 of those concerts. And then he was the Grand Marshal of the Rose Bowl in 2004. And they wanted to commission him to write a new Star Spangled Banner that both college bands would play together, and he would conduct at pregame. And it was USC, California, and Michigan. And they built a special podium. He was going to do this new killer arrangement of the national anthem, and they were going to do it right. Well, as we've heard through the years, this was 2004, but any group like that just doing an outdoor event like that, and John Williams, he's going to do a pre-record. He's not going to leave it up to the college bands, and something terrible happened, which actually it did. It was terrible in person. It was awful. But we decided in October before the event on January 1 that he's going to do a pre-record, and we're going to use the wind section out of the Indianapolis Symphony and other people. So we go up there. Paul Lavender and I go up there to do this recording, hire all these incredible players from Indiana and the Indianapolis Symphony. Great band. The arrangement's really cool. And John Williams is coming. He's flying in a private plane to conduct the session. Well, they have to warm up. So we didn't want to warm the musicians up playing the piece that he was going to rehearse. So Paul Lavender brought down Raiders March from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that was going to be the warm. If you're a trumpet player, you're kidding me. You're going to warm up with that? But that's what we warmed up with. And he went to pick John up at the airport. So I was conducting. So I'm conducting Raiders March when John Williams comes into the studio and he's waving. It sounds great. Sounds great. I mean, I almost had to just stop. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And I'll give you the final one about this, Matt. I'm probably going on too long.
No, this is awesome. You're kidding me? This is awesome.
This is absolutely true story. I teach orchestration at Furman. Well, this is a week in the spring. Paul Lavender calls me and says, he's my boss at Hal Leonard. You've seen his music. Yep. Great friend. He calls me and says, look, the Tribeca Film Festival is on in New York, and John's up here doing a thing with the music, with 2 concerts on Monday and Wednesday with the New York Philharmonic. The first half is all the music of Bernard Herrmann, and Martin Scorsese is being the narrator. And the second half is all his music and Steven Spielberg. He says, I have an extra ticket for the Wednesday show. Do you want to come up? And he said, you know, we can do the whole backstage thing and all that stuff. So I said, well, of course. Well, I had to teach orchestration on that Wednesday. But my friend, David Holsinger, whose daughter lives in Travelers Rest, which is right where I am, it's where I taught high school, was in town. I said, David, could you cover my orchestration class while I go to New York to see the John Williams concert? So he said, sure, I'll be glad to. So he came in and he subbed for me on that day that I went up there. Went up there, saw the show, got backstage. I stole all the name passes out from the dressing room doors. I still have them.
Awesome.
You know, because it was the last show. The first show was on Monday. This was a Wednesday. And the best part was when it was over, the security people came up and said, we have, you know, it's Tribeca Film Festival. A lot of famous people are around. So we've had trouble with paparazzi here trying to get at John Williams and at Spielberg and Scorsese. He says, would you guys mind being decoys? Then we'll send John out in like a 1974 Ford Pinto or something, and nobody will think it's him. Will you guys pose as him? So Paul and I said, yeah. You know, we had the kind of goatees and gray hair. We had the big portfolio scores, you know, the big leather bound. We're walking out, and the flat, this is in the bottom of Lincoln Center. And we open the door, and cameras are just going crazy, just all over the place. And Paul and I just started laughing because, you know, little by little, they're going, who are these guys? You know, so we got in the stretch Mercedes limo that took us back to the Ritz-Carlton in Central Park. And there were people there photographing us when we got out of the cars, and we were just regular Joes, you know, but we were completely the decoys while John Williams got away somehow. I don't know how they got him back. But that is a true story. That was in 2008, I think.
Oh my God, that was
Hey
awesome.
Jay, for the Marine Band concert, how did you deal with the keys for those pieces?
Original keys.
Original keys?
Yeah, we thought about it. We talked about it. Paul Lavender did the march from 1941, and he put it down a step, which made it in more better friendly band keys.
Yeah.
Thought about it, and we said, you know what? No. Let's go back to the original keys. So everything, I think, except for Far and Away was down a step.
Yeah.
From the original.
Well, for the Marine Band too, like they can play.
Yeah, they're all playing C trumpets if that's what you want them to play. I mean, they're,
yeah.
You know, I did Liberty Fanfare, which is in D major. And, you know, I wrote an E-flat clarinet part, and the E-flat clarinet player came up to me and said, can I just play it on my D? I said, you have one? He said, oh, yeah. I said, well, yeah, I put you in C, absolutely. You're the only instrument that's got to have a chance in this piece. They're unbelievable. Unbelievable. And those two concerts were pretty special.
Awesome start. Michael, you have any other questions?
No, it's hard to top that one. That was a pretty cool story.
Yeah, it's hard.
I promise I'm not making that up.
I hear that and I'm like, I got nothing.
It just, you know.
I think the kids stop asking too. No, I'm out.
Well, here's the best part. The reason I got the gig for the Rose Bowl, for that whole thing, was because I was the band guy.
Yeah.
You know, he wrote this chart. He didn't know anything about, you know, quads or multiple bass drums, or, you know, I had to be the person. So I ended up writing the drum parts to the piece and writing the drill because we had to get these two bands on, you know. So I'm at Midwest consulting with the Pieware guys of how we're going to do this and get all these people on the field. But he had to have a band guy there, and that just because I was a band guy, I got the gig. Wow. But he was gracious. We drove all around together in those Rose Bowl 1 and 2, all those cars. Every time we'd get out of a car, there were trumpets playing fanfares for him.
Wow.
It was really amazing. And it turns out that a former student of mine, Keith Lockhart at Boston Pops, is my former student. And he replaced John as the conductor of the Boston Pops. And I didn't know this, but John didn't appreciate that. So we're driving around at 6:30 in the morning, going to the Rose Bowl parade to meet at the Wrigley House with all these famous people. And I mentioned, oh, Keith Lockhart's a former student of mine at Furman.
Oh, no.
No response.
Oh, no.
No response. I was just like, oh, gosh, what am I going to do for the next 3 miles? It was awful. I think they've mended their ways since, but at that time it was still a sore subject.
Wow, that's great. Well, guys, kids, not any more questions here. I can't think of anything right now. We could wrap this up. This has been a 10 though. Love to hear, I could hear those John Williams stories all night. And any parting shots, Jay? Anything?
No, you have to know how much I respect the work you guys do. You have to know everybody in the activity does it, but it really is special to me because I've been a part of it in a small way for a long, long time. My kids from my school, if they're going to march somewhere, this is where they want to go if they can make it. And if they don't, they'll be at Spirit or somewhere like that. But it's really special what you've done and what you do, and the way you go about doing it does not go unnoticed. And hopefully to you, that's like the most important thing. It does not go unnoticed. Everybody gets it. The way you carry yourselves, the way you embrace your sound, the way you embrace the activity, it's really, really special. It's meaningful. It's something we aspire to do, all of us. And I know for Matt and Michael and all the staff to stand in front of you guys and hear what you can do. I say this very few times in my life, and Michael probably the same thing. Rarely in this business do you get to stand in front of something and it exceeds what you thought it might be when you wrote it. That doesn't happen very often, but it does with you guys, I bet. It just, the Marine Band does that too. You write something for them and they sound better than you thought it would sound. Because most of our lives as arrangers, it doesn't sound as good as it did in our head. It just doesn't, because of whatever. But it's special. You're in a special place. I know you're enjoying it. You were some of the best, finest teachers that have ever been in this activity, maybe the best. And I look forward to hearing you every time when I get a chance. I think it's just so cool you asked me to come on and chat with you guys. I think this is wonderful. I think we all need to embrace this. We should all be doing this with everybody else because there's a lot to learn from other people. It's been fun. I hope to have a chance to see all of you in person someday. Don't we all?
Yeah, awesome.
Matt, thank you for asking me.
Jay, we are all huge fans of you, so the honor is ours. And I just, I wanted to give our kids an opportunity to, hear some stories and hear you talk. And because you know what, we're going to be, most of these kids here are music educators, and they're going to be playing your music for a long, long, long time. And it's great to just get exposed to hang out with you for a little bit. So thank you, Jay.
Thank you for inviting me. You guys all stay safe. And we'll get through this and we'll get together again sometime.
Thanks,
awesome.
Jay.
Thanks again, everybody.
Love you, Jay.
I love you too, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.